All right, Dr. Maya, an expert on change. So I'm excited to dig into all things change. This is near and dear to my heart. I think this is a word in a world that people are navigating a lot of change. No question about it. So
Yes. Oh my gosh.
thanks. Oh my gosh, a ton. And you too, by the way, right now. So it is, it's awesome to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I'm a big fan of yours.
No, well, that is kind. So I sort of want to start here, which is why does change feel so hard?
Yes. I think for many reasons. The first is that change is accompanied by so much uncertainty. And we know from research that our brains are not wired to like uncertainty. So, one of my favorite research studies shows that we are more stressed when we're told we have a 50% chance of getting an electric shock than when we're told we have a 100% chance of getting that shock. And it's kind of funny and wild and quirky, right, Molly? We'd rather be
Totally.
sure. Yeah, we'd rather be sure that a bad thing's going to happen than to have to grapple with any uncertainty. But if you're anything like me, it resonates with you, that finding, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the type of person who likes having her hands firmly on the steering wheel. I like knowing how the story ends. I hate the anticipatory anxiety that comes along with, an unexpected outcome. And so one of the reasons why change can feel so daunting is that as humans, we just really like clarity and we like black and white answers and definitive answers. But when we climb out of the rubble of an unexpected change, oftentimes all we see is gray space around us. There's no black and white anything, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
really hard for our minds to process.
It is so hard. I mean, it's so interesting because, we just sort of came out of this madness of Lane Kiffin and the SEC with sort of where he was going to go. And it was almost like you started to see people sort of decide, to your point about the 50%, we just want to know whether it was going to be good or not good for whatever they perceived to be good or not good for them. They just wanted an answer. They wanted certainty, to your point, which is so interesting. So as a cognitive scientist, what's happening in our minds when we hit a pivot point in our lives? Like, what is happening in our brains and our that impacts obviously the way we show up, what we do, how we feel, certainly. What's going
Yeah.
on up in there?
So in addition to the challenges of grappling with uncertainty, which can give rise to rumination and all sorts of worries in our brains, endless questions that don't have answers. Another reason why change can be really, really scary is that it threatens our self identity. So this
Mm-hmm.
was a big aha moment for me, both in writing The Other Side of Change and then also hosting my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans. That all of this work was actually about our sense of self and who we are. And when a big change happens, it often reveals to us just how much our identity was tethered to something that we did. So, to make this concrete, when I was a little kid, my life was devoted to becoming a concert violinist. I started playing when I was 6. By the time I was 9, I was studying at Juilliard. As a teenager, the renowned violinist Itzhak Perlman invited me to be his private student. And so all my big dreams were coming true. And I thought, okay, maybe I have what it takes to go pro.
Mm-hmm.
And Molly, everything was going to plan until my slight change of plans. When I was 15, I had a sudden, unexpected or when I was 15, I had a hand injury. And out of the clear blue sky, sorry, when I was 15, I had a hand injury. And afterwards, doctors told me that this was a career ending injury, that my dreams of becoming a violinist were over. And to my earlier point, I don't think that I had understood just how much the violin defined me until I lost
Mm-hmm.
it. Because I
Mm.
remember grieving not just the loss of the instrument, but also the loss of myself in this more foundational way, right? The violin, and I'm sure so many
Mm-hmm.
people listening have the
Sure.
equivalent in their lives, whether it's a sports identity or um,
Mm-hmm.
being any role or label that you
Sure.
carry in the world, right? It becomes a huge part
Sure.
of your self-confidence, the way that you move about in the world, the communities that you affiliate with. And then suddenly, when that anvil drops from the sky, that whole landscape changes and you are left
Mm-hmm.
feeling unmoored, unmoored. And you're left feeling unmoored and totally untethered. And so that formative experience with change taught me that our brains are not just grappling with the standard anxieties that can come along with the unexpected. We're dealing with profound grief because the person that we thought we were and the person we thought we would become is no longer available to us.
Oh, which, I saw that so much in the world of sports, right? With an athlete, when they've got a jersey on their back and their name on their back and everybody takes your call and, everything happens in that space and they're so identifying. Also, not just identity, but I'm curious as to your take as that the alignment with identity and a sense of self-worth.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
And that's a scary thing.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because, again, I resonate with that so much. I mean, to get a bit personal for a moment, one of the reasons why my violin identity meant so much to me is that as a little kid, I was bullied a lot by the girls in my neighborhood. I was one of a few brown kids in a predominantly Caucasian school. And when I was at Juilliard, I felt like I really belonged because it was an international school. There were students from all over the world. The color of my skin didn't matter. And I just felt like that was my community. And so I felt worthy within those walls. So I felt like not only do I belong, but the violin is what makes me special, despite the cruelty and the taunts of the girls in my neighborhood, the violin was what made me feel like I mattered in this world. And so when it was taken away from me, I absolutely felt like maybe my worth was being compromised in some way. And one lesson that's taken me decades to learn, and I really want to share this with your listeners because I don't want them to make the same mistakes I've made when it comes to navigating change, is to learn to develop a more flexible and expansive self-identity. One way to do this is to define yourself not simply by what you do, but by why you do that thing. So I think in society, we are often anchored to roles and labels, right? Even as little kids, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? We're never asked, who do you want to be when you grow up, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And the significance of that is we think of ourselves, well, I'm an athlete, I'm a musician, I'm a writer, I'm a parent, right? We give ourselves these labels. And the challenge is that when life makes other plans for us and takes away some of those labels, it can feel like we don't have a soft landing, that all of us has been taken away from us. But if we can define ourselves based on our why, and by that I mean what draws us to that thing in the first place, what we feel so passionately about, then we do have a soft landing. So for example, if you're an athlete, ask yourself, what is it that I love about being an athlete? I love the motivation. I love being motivated by things. I love seeing myself improve at something. I love energizing a crowd. I love connecting with my fellow teammates and being part of something that's bigger than myself. For me with the violin, I realized that a desire for emotional connection was at the heart of my love of the instrument. And when you define yourself in these terms, right? I, Maya, am someone who thrives on emotional connection. Then when you get that curveball, the exercise becomes, well, where else can I find ways to express this part of myself? Because just because I lost the violin doesn't mean that I lost what led me to love it in the first place. I can find other outlets through which to express my desire for human connection. And it turns out, Molly, that I have done that subconsciously, right? In my role as a podcaster, in writing The Other Side of Change, interviewing people for years, emotional connection was at that core. And so everyone now, take a moment of reflection to think, well, what is my why? And can I use that to steer me towards my next step so that I don't feel like I am no longer me when life makes sense?
How do we, I think that is so cool and so interesting. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think when we look in the rear view mirror, it's a little easier to sort of put the puzzle pieces together. But I'm wondering when you're in that moment, right? Like when you're in it as a young, thriving, clearly remarkable violinist or an athlete, or whether it's a mom and the kids go off to college or you change careers, how do you sort of know that, gosh, I'm sort of in a place where I need to start asking myself that why a little bit more. Like, how do we at some level sort of shake and wake up in those moments so that we don't have an unexpected change happen and not be well positioned to navigate it in a healthy way?
It's such a great question. And actually, I was very intentional when writing the book to write it not just for people who are in the throes of change, which is the most difficult emotional state to be in,
Sure.
but to also write it for people who want to get ahead of a future change, who want to proactively build a toolkit that insulates them from the risk of change, and also
Right.
people who are looking to process a past change that might continue to this day to make them feel irked and uneasy in some way, and they want to renew their relationship with that change. And so one of the things that I built was a change survival kit. So the appendix of the book is a change survival kit. It's giving people all of these science-based techniques and tools and questions and approaches that they can adopt today, regardless of their circumstances, so that when something strikes in the future, they already feel like they have a more robust, resilient sense of self that can weather change more effectively. To your point, though, if you are in the throes of change, engaging in this kind of exercise around discovering your why is a wonderful thing to do at any point because it is centering. It helps ground you in your values. It helps you discover what it is that you love in the world. Some people struggle to figure out what their why is, and I always give them two pieces of advice. Number one, try to go back to your childhood and remember the things that you gravitated towards naturally. So were you the kid on the playground who was like trying to scale to the top of the playground set and
Right.
was super adventurous and was doing the monkey bars? Or were you like me who was like sitting there listening to everyone's conversations and trying to understand social dynamics and wanted to be in on the gossip or whatever it was? Like that was sort of an indicator, oh, Maya, you're really fascinated by other people's brains, right? And like how humans work.
Sure.
And you can often reconnect with your deepest passions by thinking about what you as a kid did when you were given unstructured playtime of any kind, right? What were the things that you gravitated towards? What made you excited on any given day? And that can be very instructive. The other thing is to not discount things that come naturally to you or that you feel you're fairly good at because you don't see it as something that can rise to the level of a why or a strong identity. So to make this concrete, I remember right when the pandemic was starting, I remember at the end of maybe 2019, 2020, I was having kind of like some sort of crisis. And I was walking with a friend and I remember telling him, I just feel like I'm not passionate about anything. And he said, Maya, you're super passionate about humans. And I was like, that doesn't count. That's not a real passion to be curious about people. And he looked at me and said, take it from someone who's not. That's a passion. And so I think sometimes we can discount the things that, again, just come really organically to us or that we feel so curious about because we just assume, oh, that's nothing or everyone's like that. And that's just often not true.
Sure.
So I think, one, engage in that why. Maybe your why is giving back to your community. Maybe your why is seeing yourself improve at something. Maybe it is expressing your creativity through some means. Maybe it is connecting with other people and joining a community. It can be anything. Don't be judgmental about what that thing is. Just make sure that you frame it in identity terms. The other thing I would recommend is to engage in what's called a self-affirmation exercise. So this is when you just take 5 or 10 minutes to write down every identity in your life that matters to you and brings your life meaning and purpose. So you can write down, I just joined a pickleball club, right? Or I just joined a book club, or I am the head of the PTA, or I organized a bake sale for my kids' fundraiser. Whatever it is, just write down all the things that give your life meaning.
Or I started a company. Or I just wrote a book.
Exactly.
I'm imagining your list, but go ahead.
No, that's how I look on my list. You write down the things that it's almost a gratitude exercise of sorts, right? All the labels and roles it's kind of like a gratitude exercise, right? You just write down all the things that bring your life meaning, and importantly, if you are in the throes of a change, you want to focus on the things that are not threatened by the change that you're going through. So, for example, if you've just been laid off, if you just lost your job, if your sports career is over, you might focus instead on your spiritual life or the joy that your family brings you or the joy that your friends bring you. Or if you're in a really rough patch in your relationship, you might focus on the friendship circle you're in, or the fact that you derive a lot of meaning from your daily work, right? So you want to shift the focus towards the things in your life that are still very much intact and present. And what this does is that it helps you zoom out and to be reminded of how multifaceted and multidimensional your life actually is, so that you don't feel so fully threatened by the change you're going through. In fact, there's
Wow.
research showing that it actually helps stave off denial. Because what is denial, right? It's an avoidance of the truth, of the facts, because it's
Sure.
too much for your
Sure.
brain to process. But if you don't feel like your whole identity is under threat because of the change, you're going to be more likely to assimilate that information into your brain and actually tolerate it.
Got it. So you're saying identify the other roles in your life that give you meaning, that
Exactly.
you're really deeply okay. That's awesome. And then focus on those. It allows you to zoom out from the maybe the thing that you're sort of really had a large attachment to or a big attachment to that was in fact feeling like your identity.
And by the way, this actually did work for me when I was in the throes of a very challenging change. So, long story short, my husband and I embarked on this 6 or 7 year journey to try to start a family. We were unsuccessful. We ran into many obstacles and disappointments and heartbreaks. And I still remember on the night of the second miscarriage with our surrogate, when we
Mm,
found out that we had lost identical twin girls, I was beside myself with grief. I was like tucked under
mm-hmm,
the covers in our bed. And my husband
mm.
comes into the room, and he's a software engineer, but he actually unknowingly engaged me in this self affirmation exercise because he came in and he
Oh,
said, Maya, let's just write down, or sorry, he said, Maya, let's just name a couple things we're grateful for. And I remember in that moment, Molly, being like, oh, hell no.
right.
I'm not doing this.
Right.
Like today was
Wow.
jarring. Okay. Like earlier
Yeah.
today we saw healthy beating hearts. Now we're dealing with the
Mm,
miscarriage news. Like my brain did not feel like it was an appropriate moment to express gratitude. But
right.
I just sort of looked at my husband, Jimmy, and he was like so sweet and earnest in this effort. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, look, at a minimum, if I just do this thing, I'll get him off my back. Right. And so I start to rattle some things off. I'm like, okay, well, I'm I feel so grateful that I get to be an aunt to my 6 nieces and
Mm,
nephews. I
mm-hmm.
love that I get to host a slight change of plans from the closet in our apartment. Like, what an
Mm-hmm.
incredible way to connect with people all over the world about their amazing stories of change. I love doing my Zoom workouts with my trainer, Matt. We get to gossip about
Uh-huh.
The Bachelor and Love is Blind while doing deadlifts. And this list just like flowed out of me, Molly. And I swear to
Wow.
God, something magical happened in that moment, which is I had been so single mindedly focused on this goal of becoming a parent. And I'm sure so many people listening, they have that same ethos of like, get
Mm-hmm.
this thing done, accomplish it, right? That I
Mm-hmm.
had lost
Mm-hmm.
sight of how otherwise rich and multifaceted my life was. And so, did I go to bed thrilled that night? Of course not. I wasn't like over the
Mm-hmm.
moon happy, but I did go to bed feeling more full, more
Mm.
intact, and like this change had not challenged everything that I knew to be true about my life, which is how I had kind of, you know, been prior to doing this exercise.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And that I've listened to you and heard you talk about before, and I'm so sorry for what
Oh,
you've
thank you.
navigated, and I know that's been recently at some level.
Yep.
How have how was it the next day and the next day and the next day, right? Like did you find yourself continuing to remind yourself of the things that you're grateful for? Did you reframe your mindset around motherhood and your role as an aunt, if you will?
Yeah, that's such a thoughtful question and one that I've never been asked before. It's been a very long journey. I mean, that's the thing with grief, that's the thing with
Mm,
change, that's the thing with identity. There's no quick fixes. You often
mm-hmm.
surprise yourself where one day you feel very stable and okay, and then the next day you're a mess. But
Sure.
I think overall, I've become so I think sorry, I'm stumbling because I'm just trying to think.
That's okay.
But I
Take your
think
time.
I've been so surprised about the person that I become on the other side of this. And look, there's a reason that I call my book The Other Side of Change. It
Mm-hmm.
refers to the idea that we become different people when life throws us these massive curveballs in ways that are hard to anticipate, but in ways that can actually be beautiful and poignant. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a psychological bias called the end of history illusion. And all it says is that while we fully acknowledge we've changed considerably in the past, so if you were to show me footage of me from like when I was 10 or 20, I'd be like, "Oh my God, Molly, cringe. I like don't want to see any of that. I'm such a different person today." But then if you were to ask me, "Well, how much are you going to change moving forward?" My brain would
Mm.
be like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm done. Like what you see is
Yeah.
what you get. This is the finished product." And so it's such a funny
Wow.
quirk in our brains that we just assume that who we are right now in this very moment is the version that's here to stay. But the reality, of course, is that we're constantly changing, and a big change in our lives can accelerate those internal shifts because when a big change happens to us, it also leads to profound change within us. And that's so important to remember because what it
Mm.
means is that when we're daunted at the outset of a change and think, I can't possibly navigate this, I can't possibly go through this, actually, it's a different person who's going to be navigating all of that. It's going to be a person with new abilities and new capabilities. And sorry, it's going to be a person with new capabilities and new perspectives and new values. And that is the person who's actually going to be confronting the full experience of change and coming
Wow.
out the other side. So you asked me about my views on motherhood, and I actually credit the people that I spent years interviewing for the other side of change for this internal transformation within me because I never saw it coming. If you had asked me on the night of the second miscarriage, are you ever going to feel whole if you don't have children? I would have been like,
Mm-hmm.
nope. Are you ever going to feel like there's anything redemptive to come from this horrible
Mm-hmm.
experience? I would be like, nope. Do you think you're going to be a better
Right.
person on the other side of this? I'd be like, nope. And I've proven myself wrong because here I am years later. I'm still not a parent, and I'm feeling more hopeful and more peaceful than I ever had. I feel like I have a much more enlightened view of my relationship with parenthood. So I realize, I mean, one thing change can do is it can give us a really unique opportunity to question the belief systems that we have that might be holding us back. So I had to go back
Mm-hmm.
to my childhood and maybe all of the cultural influences and the pop cultural influences that
Mm-hmm.
told me that my worth comes from becoming a parent as a woman in this
Mm.
society, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I had to unpack that. Like, why have I felt my whole life that unless I become a parent, I can't live a happy, meaningful, fulfilling
Mm.
life? Who told me those
Mm-hmm.
messages? Is there validity to
Sure.
those messages? Why can't we contribute to the world and fulfill that meaning and purpose through other routes, right? And so
Sure.
I felt like I was able to kind of reestablish my relationship with this whole concept as a result of learning again from the wisdom and reflections of the people I interviewed for the book, and
Mm-hmm.
to end up on the other
Mm-hmm.
side still feeling very whole and very intact and actually carrying around with me a kind of freedom that I was not
Wow.
expecting.
Wow. That is that's remarkable. And the relationship that I've heard you talk about, by the way, with your surrogate is so cool too.
Yeah.
I
Haley,
just oh
amazing
my
human.
gosh, oh my gosh, it's just fantastic. I mean, it's just so heartwarming, really. And and there's I'm curious with all of the interviews you've done and the learn and that all of the studies and the research. There's change that we choose, and then there's
Yes.
change that is sort of unwanted change that happens to us. And there's even change that we choose, but it's still really, really hard often.
Yes.
And there's change that we choose that we're excited about and it's good. What can we learn from how we show up in a healthy way around the change that we wanted to help us navigate unwanted change that comes our way so often, in a variety of ways, big and small, all day long, personally and professionally, so that we can show up in those moments, as the best version of ourselves, because we have this muscle, right? Because we're doing it in sort of other circumstances. So I'm just curious. You have a lot more degrees than me. So I'm just curious, what can we take from that we already have in us to help us navigate sort of these unwanted changes that are happening to us? Because that's something that I'm hearing constantly from, obviously, from organizations and leaders.
Yeah.
In the corporate environment, it's drastic levels of change, and it's fast.
So every story that I feature in the book is actually about unwanted change, unexpected unwanted change. And the reason I focused on that is that it does inspire a very different kind of mentality than when we are willing the change ourselves. Even though the changes we will, like you said, are hard, or they might surprise us in some ways, we might not actually be as happy as we thought on the other side of those changes. It does
Sure.
recruit a kind of self-agency that we often feel we lack when it comes to unexpected change. So actually, when I reflect on my journey to become a parent, I actually think what left me feeling so unsettled by the change was the lack of control I felt, right? I'm the type of person who likes to work her way through challenges, right? Just like hustles her way through.
Yeah.
And the reality of the fertility space is that there's no such thing as working harder. The universe doesn't care how much you want the outcome, how, quote, much effort you're putting into it, right? It will just be as it is. And to relinquish that kind of control is very scary for a lot of us. So there's a concept in psychology called the illusion of control. And it refers to the idea that we often wildly overestimate the degree to which we control the outcomes in our lives. And I fall prey to the illusion of control all the time. And by the way, it makes sense that we would have evolved to have this illusion because at the end of the day, we would all descend into nihilism if we felt we had no control over our lives, right? Like none of us would want to work hard. We'd be like, what's the point of any of it? And of course, our efforts do translate into outcomes. It's just that there are limits to that control. And sometimes when that big anvil falls from the sky, it shatters that illusion. And so one of the chapters that I write in the book is actually about our relationship with what's called cognitive closure, our desire to have, full closure after an event, to have full certainty, clear answers, and all the strategies we can use to calm our nervous system down, to try to make it so that we actually have higher well-being in the throes of uncertainty so that we can move forward more productively than we otherwise would. And then I also think that, actually, no, we already talked about that. Yep.
What about how do we help other people who are navigating change, right? I mean, and even if it's change, I have, a daughter we have daughters that are graduating from college soon. We have a daughter that's just starting her first job. My parents are getting older and navigating sort of those physical changes.
Yeah.
How do we help and support the people that we love and even the people that we lead, which maybe is both? How do we do that when they're navigating change? How can we show up for them in a way that serves them really, really well and effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've spent so much time thinking in my research and whatnot about how it is that we can not just support ourselves, but support other people who are in the throes of change. Because oftentimes when we hear someone's navigating an illness or the loss of a loved one or any other sort of crisis, we're often at a loss. We don't know how we can support them. I think the biggest barrier we often face at these inflection points is a limited imagination about what our lives can look like next. So there is a concept known as possible selves in the psychological literature. And we generate possible selves all the time. So we conjure up possible selves when we are a high school student in a lab coat, imagining ourselves one day becoming a scientist. We generate possible selves when we sustain an injury as an athlete and we have to imagine what comes next. So these are these creations we're making all the time as we go about our lives. And possible selves come in a couple categories. So there are hoped for selves, which reflect our dreams and our aspirations. There are feared selves, which reflect our anxieties and our worries. And then there are expected selves. So these are the selves that we just assume will come true, good or bad, just based on the reality of our lives. And one thing that can happen when we are faced with a big change is we can our imagination can be limited about what those hoped for selves can look like in our new circumstances. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, a bunch of feared selves come to mind that we weren't
Mm-hmm.
otherwise expecting. So if we suddenly have to become a caregiver, right? We have all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of doors closing around us, like, oh, all these versions of me that I hope would come true are no longer possible. Or, what futures are available to someone who is a high school dropout or is a teen mom or who has lost their job or who is a widow, right? We just have
Mm-hmm.
stereotypes that are
Mm-hmm.
unfair that
Mm-hmm.
we carry around those
Mm-hmm.
possibilities. And so one person that I interviewed for the book, Dwayne, he was a he was 16 years old when he was sentenced to 9 years in adult prison for a carjacking that he committed. And naturally, he was extremely fearful of who he might become behind bars. So,
Sure.
this was someone who was hoping to go to Georgia Tech to study engineering. He was class treasurer. He had such a promising future, and he made a really stupid mistake because he was trying to
Mm-hmm.
impress the boys in his neighborhood. Um, and so Dwayne was saying, I was worried all of a sudden, would I become violent in prison? Would I develop a gambling habit? Would I, will someone stab me because I owed them money, right? All of these fears came to mind. And he had a very limited understanding of what lives were available to him now that he was embodying the identity of a prisoner. And
Mm.
then one day, he has an encounter with someone that inspires what's called moral elevation within him. So, what is moral elevation? It's that warm, fuzzy feeling that we get in our chests when we witness someone else's extraordinary actions. So that might be their self-sacrifice. That might be their that might be their self-sacrifice or their courage or their resilience or their ability to forgive, or their
Mm-hmm.
tenacity, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And moral elevation doesn't just feel good, it actually changes our brains. Because in seeing someone else defy our understanding of what humans are capable of, it actually cracks open our own imagination of what we are capable of. And so for
Wow.
Dwayne, encountering this guy, Bilal, in prison, sorry, I'll try to get through the story fast. So Dwayne encounters a fellow prisoner who defies all of Dwayne's stereotypes of what it means to be a prisoner. This guy, his name is Bilal, gets up an hour before count time, does 250 push-ups before the guards even come by. He irons his prison clothes every single day so that they're nice and crisp. He cares
Mm-hmm.
for the younger boys and teaches them how to box as a way of protecting themselves against the threat of violence in an environment where Dwayne thought that you had to be ruthlessly self-interested. And so as Dwayne said, Bilal taught him that there were other ways of being, that you didn't have to be a certain
Mm.
way just because you were a prisoner. And there's this beautiful quote in the book where Dwayne says, Bilal taught me what it meant to be lovely, you know? And
Wow.
so
Yep. Yep.
with that moral elevation experience in mind, a few weeks later, when Dwayne encounters a book of poetry within the walls of prison and reads a poem that represents younger boys of color in the prison system, suddenly his imagination starts to run wild and he thinks, well, I can't do what Bilal did for the younger boys in prison because I'm not strong enough to like teach them how to box, but I could use my words to dignify and record their experiences. And so it's
Mm.
through that he decides he's going to become a poet. And fast forward a couple decades, today Dwayne is a Yale Law School graduate who
Wow.
helps fellow prisoners get parole and whatnot. He is a MacArthur Genius Prize winner, and he writes some of the most beautiful, stirring poetry that I can imagine. And so
Wow.
I share this story because it reveals the power that other people hold when it comes to shaping our understanding of what our futures can look like. So when
Mm-hmm.
I feel that people in my life are stuck, I actually encourage them to invite moments of moral beauty into their lives, to seek out examples of other
Mm-hmm.
people who are challenging their understanding of amazing actions that humans are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
that can help them unlock, well, when I am an empty nester, what lives are actually possible for me? When I am
Right.
an athlete whose career is over, maybe there are more futures available to me than the ones that I've been told by, you know, images from pop culture,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it
Right.
just opens up our minds to these amazing worlds.
I think that, and so and I love this possible self concept and the various, and you unpack that in the book, which is awesome. January 13th it releases.
Yes.
It's a great read. I was able to get an early copy and comb through it. It was awesome. The Other Side of Change. So if somebody wants to strengthen really, right now their personal capacity for change, what's one small thing that they could start practicing right now?
Yeah. So, it's funny because it's one thing to generate new possible selves, and it's another thing to realize those new possible selves. That takes a lot of grit and determination and hard work.
Sure.
Let me share a couple of motivational strategies that I use every day to try to get myself to actually reach those goals and to actually realize author Maya, or, that took a lot of personal, I'm on the heels of that required a lot of intrinsic motivation. It was really hard.
You ain't kidding. Totally. Yes.
So my favorite one is actually called temptation bundling, my favorite strategy. And all temptation bundling involves is pairing a difficult task, the thing you're trying to work towards, with something that is immediately rewarding and enjoyable. And importantly, you have to deny yourself access to that immediately rewarding thing in all other contexts. So this sounds like the silliest little thing, but I swear to God it worked. So every day when I would sit down to do my writing session, I would have a bowl of candy on my desk. And I was only allowed to eat this candy when I was writing. I was not allowed to enjoy it during any other parts of my day, any other times.
You should be really fat then, because it takes a long time to write. Okay, this is cool.
So it's funny because your subconscious starts to sort of look forward to those sessions because, look, most of the big, hefty goals that we try to take on only deliver returns on investment far down the line, right? You only see the big results a couple months from now, maybe if you're lucky, a couple weeks from now. But most of the hard stuff in life takes years to materialize. And so you can't just hold on to the hope like, okay, one day this book will be written. You just need something in the moment to be like, I really like these coffee chews and I just want to eat them right now. And it's incredible how the memory works, right? You start to pair these two things. And I have a similar relationship with I'll save my favorite songs, I have a similar relationship when it comes to exercise. So I'll save my favorite songs, I'll save my favorite shows, let's say, for when I'm working out. And I can only watch those shows, I can only listen to that music when I'm doing like high intensity interval training or whatnot to get me really pumped up. And so that's the temptation bundling. It's so simple, but it's a really wonderful way of getting us to actually do the things that are annoying. And by the way, you don't have to use this just in terms of goal pursuit. You have to fold laundry, listen to your favorite podcast, right? You have to do the dishes, pair that with something else that you enjoy. Okay, so that's one. The second is there's a really fascinating body of research around how it is that we form memories, how we remember experiences. And it turns out that when we recall how pleasant or unpleasant an experience was, we don't give equal weight to every moment. We prioritize the emotional peak of that experience, whether positive or negative, and the end of that experience. So we give disproportionate weight to those two moments in time. Wow. What this means in terms of goal pursuit is that you can actually shape the ending of a challenging experience to make it slightly more pleasurable so that you look back on it more fondly. So let's say you've just done the hardest workout and you are dying and you are not looking forward to the next one. You just tack on to that training session a gentle stretch or some deep breathing or something that's a little bit more pleasurable, and you will look back more fondly on that workout and be more likely to return to it. Or let's say I sit down to write and I'm doing the hardest paragraphs. Maybe I end the session by just doing a couple bullet points. And it's just leveraging this funny quirk in the way that we form memories.
That's amazing.
Sorry, can I just share one more tactic? Because this actually is also
really
helpful.
This is amazing. Yes, I love it.
On the topic of these big goals, right? I was saying they can be so daunting at the outset, right? It's like, okay, the book took me 3.5 years to write, probably more than that, actually. So you're not thinking at the beginning, okay, here I start my 3 to 4 year goal, right? That's really deeply motivating and very, very hard task. So there's research showing that there is so much value in taking a big goal and just breaking it into smaller parts. Smaller parts that you can celebrate in the short term, that can make you feel that sense of identity, right? The difference between not writing and writing 1 minute a day is that in the second domain, you're a writer, right? You now have that identity that you can brag about to yourself, and that can reinforce the identity and become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the reason also why breaking a big long-term goal into shorter goals is that it avoids a phenomenon known as the middle problem. So researchers have found that when it comes to motivation over the course of goal pursuit, we don't have stable amounts of motivation. So we have a big burst in motivation at the beginning of our goal. So just think about like New Year's Day,
Sure.
right? Everyone's
Yes.
rushing to the gym. Everyone's super
Ugh.
motivated. They're there at like 6 a.m. They're like, I got this.
Right. Yeah.
And then we see a big surge in motivation towards the end of the goal because, you're close to the finish line. You just have to get over
Right.
that, final
Right.
mile.
You gotta finish. Right.
Exactly. So you get that big surge, but there's a lull in motivation during that middle period. So that's when people start to fall off the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a year-long goal, that middle period is multiple months long, which means you have
Sure.
all those months to fall off the wagon and give up on your goal. But if you set a weekly goal, which was, I just want to, do my first push-up, or that's kind of hard for, I don't even think I could, let me give you a different example based on my expectations. We just have a smaller goal of like incremental
Yes.
progress in strength training,
Sure.
or I just want to write a
Sure.
paragraph, or I just want to polish my CV because I'm looking for work. Then that middle period is only a couple days. And so you're limiting the
Right.
continuous stretch of time in which you have that low motivation, and you're going to get that nice positive surge as you reach the end of the week, as you're almost to the finish line. So anyway, I've just given people a sample. There's a whole suite of motivational techniques that I talk about in The Other Side of Change, and I can say from my personal experience, they've totally changed my life because they're all small and easy to use and easy to implement. And the reason I focus on those strategies is that what is kind of a universal characteristic shared by all of us in the throes of change, or when we're trying to inspire change, we're tired, we're exhausted.
Yes.
We don't
It takes
want
energy.
to have hefty homework
Yes.
assignments to change our brains. And so I wanted to focus on easy to implement strategies that anyone can do, irrespective of resources and time.
That is, and I loved that section of the book, by the way. Like, it's so highly tactical. You can lift it up and deploy it right away. And this feels interesting too. Like if you're walking into a meeting that you have consistently and you don't love it for whatever reason, but you love coffee taffy or whatever the candy was you referenced, then have a little bit of that while you're in this meeting, right? Like, and then you start to sort of shift.
Beverage, right? You're like, I never, like, I'm gonna hold off on my whatever mocha latte, until this meeting, or my favorite,
sure,
or whatever it is, like,
right.
But there's lots of ways to just integrate these little rewards into our day, that in ways that make them psychologically paired to the thing that you're really struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
But also eat
One
healthy.
of the
Sorry, I don't mean to be.
No, I know. No, I know. Well, no, I mean, by the way, like, I just have like celery and carrots in front of me. That's my treat. I don't know what you're talking about over there. No, I'm just kidding. So I've heard you, this is so cool. And when you talk about how there's 3 questions to ask yourself when you find out that you're potentially embarked relative to change, and you sort of talk about, how might this change how what I'm capable of? I thought this was so highly tactical too, and really a powerful thing. As I think about the people in my life that I love that are going through change, I think, wow, wait, how can they unpack these 3 questions in service of allowing them to really sort of embark on the change in a way that will maybe be healthier, or see kind of the upside, the growth mindset, the opportunity in it, versus feeling that it's going to be hard or clunky. Because it is a bit of a mindset shift too, isn't it? To sort of, wait a minute, maybe this is going to be a good thing. Maybe this is an opportunity for growth. Maybe the way I'm thinking about change is actually the problem, not the change itself. I just thought those 3 questions were...
No, sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just thought those 3 questions were really, really cool, because it just helps you sort of take this possibility lens, which is just really powerful.
That is so beautifully said, Molly. So thank you for sharing that. And you're exactly right. I think it's very hard when we are in the midst of a change to see that there could be a silver lining. And by the way, I'm the first person to be skeptical of this, right? I'm like, I'm allergic to two things. I'm allergic to soy and I'm allergic to platitudes and cliches. So when someone tells me the hardest moment of your life could give you this opportunity, I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Right. Of course. Maybe for you, but definitely not for me. But I've seen it now in all the people that I spent years interviewing. They weren't happy
Mm-hmm.
about the change they experienced. Who's ever going to will illness or grief into their lives? But
Sure.
every person was deeply happy with the person that they became as a result of the change they went through, of the kind of
Mm-hmm.
possibility it unlocked within them, of what it revealed to them. You know, we can think of change as revelation. Change gives us a moment to see ourselves in new lights, right? To see parts of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
that were previously hidden from view and to use that information to shape the person we become. And
Mm-hmm.
because I experienced this in my own life, I now believe it. So, as we talked about, I did not see a promising future for myself without becoming a parent. And I never thought I'd be in this current position where we still have embryos. My husband and I have discussed adoption. We've had all these conversations about what it would
Mm-hmm.
look like to start a family. But for the first time ever, I'm feeling peace around being child free, which I never ever
Wow.
thought was on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I mean when I say, what new perspectives might this unlock within us, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
change can lead us to challenge our worldview. It can lead us
Mm-hmm.
to challenge these beliefs that we thought were these sacred, immutable truths about the world. But we actually
Yep.
see them differently when we go through these experiences. And so I feel like it's so important for me to share my current state because like, I was in it with all of you guys, going through this
Right. Yeah.
not believing that I would become a different person on the other side. But when you
Mm-hmm.
experience that transformation yourself, you
Yeah.
start to believe it. And I think that's
Sure.
the power of these unexpected moments. And that's why one of the questions I ask in The Other Side of Change is what if we came to see the hardest moments in our lives as a chance to reimagine who we can be?
Mm. That's so good. I love that. And it's so true. I
It
mean,
is
we
really.
grow. I mean, change is a part of our own growth. So it's
Mhm.
an inevitable component of it. But yet, change is often resisted. But growth is what I think we all want deeply. Maybe not the things that
Absolutely.
go with it, but we want it. So I think these questions are really powerful. How might the change what I'm capable of? You talk about how might this change what I value, and how might it change how I define myself. It's so good. I could talk to you forever, but you have got some other fish to fry. You've got a book coming out. This is so exciting. It is a great book. I mean, cognitive scientists, you are one smart cookie who, wow, it's such a pleasure to connect in this way. I want to hit you with rapid fire real quick. Is that cool? I want
Yes,
to hit you with a
please. Of
couple.
course. It was such a
What
joy to
is
conversation.
Oh, well, you're sweet. What is a book you recommend most often?
I love the book Unfit Parent. It is by a disability advocate whose name is it's by a disability advocate named Jessica Slice. And she talks about moving through the world as someone who has physical limitations and is a loving and doting parent to her kids, but who faces profound
Mm,
judgment about her capabilities. And I interviewed her on my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans. And there are some interviews, Molly, that totally change your perspective on the world
mm-hmm,
and allow you to see things that you've never seen before. And
mm-hmm.
Jessica had that impact on me.
Wow, that's awesome. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh, that's a great one. When I worked in the White House, I was told by my boss to think of myself as a policy entrepreneur. And government, the federal government and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, those words don't typically go in the same sentence. But
Sure.
it was a mindset shift that was so empowering, which was no matter what the organizations are that we're in, no matter what challenge we're facing, we have to
Mm-hmm.
have that entrepreneurial spirit where we
Sure.
learn how to overcome barriers, where we figure out creative workarounds, where we lead with inspiration, where we're constantly innovating. And I feel like I've carried that innovative I feel like I've carried that innovative mindset with me no matter where I'm working and no matter what it is that
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on.
Mm,
And so, yeah, I feel like that's been something that I've carried with me for quite some time.
that's really cool. All right, so the show's called Game Changers. So who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why? Jimmy? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
I know, let me think. I mean, certainly Jimmy. Um, yeah, my husband Jimmy. I think that he has taught me that I can be fully myself without any reservation and
Mm,
feel so fully loved and adored by him. And I just can't think of a greater gift to be given than the
sure.
feeling of being not only understood, but
Mm,
appreciated by someone in that way.
wow. He sounds really special. One heck of a software
He
engineer
is. He's
that
so
clearly
lucky.
has a he's he's
Got a big
and he
heart.
is a yeah, but it's with a big heart. Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Maya. Super fun to be with you. And thank you for writing this book. It's a book that's going to help so many people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly, for having me. You asked wonderful, thought-provoking questions, and so I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Super fun.